Hi everyone, this is Ekaterina. So we just had our third lesson in college and I'm very excited to share with you that we are starting our practical sessions. So similar to what we've done last year, we are going to have practical sessions only with each other, meaning that only students are involved in those sessions, and we'll try to imitate the key 3 parts of any counseling relationship. So this week we started with the beginning, whereby we were meeting our clients for the very first time and explaining to them the counseling contract. Next week we will have the middle part, so it's going to be all about actually exploring the issue that the client wanted to discuss in counseling, identifying the tools, the skills they have or might need to develop in order to face those challenges, and obviously how can we actually resolve that issue in the best possible way for that client. And finally, we'll have a session dedicated to ending of the counseling relationship. So that important closure stage when we summarize all the progress we've done, and obviously giving that final reassurance to our clients that they're ready to function independently and that they now have the skills and knowledge on how to address any future similar issues. So all those 3 parts are very important counseling relationship. Now I do know that some people tend to kind of finish their counseling on a very short notice and sometimes not even giving any notice to their counselors, so they never have that closure part. And this is something that I would actually really encourage people to consider. So sometimes people have to cancel counseling because they're just not able to afford it anymore. So I understand that there can be other kind of difficulties involved, but it is still important to have, I would say, that at least one last session as a closure, because this can be as important to client as for the counselor, where they can really see that they've done a good job and that they were able to support the client. That's their opportunity to reflect on that particular counseling relationship, learn from anything that they could have, done better or differently. And at the same time, as I said, it gives the client that feeling of achievement and also reassurance that they are now ready to end their counseling relationship. Now, in some cases, counseling can also come to an end because the client is just not feeling comfortable with that particular counselor. I still think it's a good manner to at least mention to the counselor the reason for you stopping the counseling, because it might help them to kind of approach their clients differently in the future or be more aware of some of the limitations they have. And also they could possibly refer the client to a different specialist if they have one in mind. So don't just kind of abandon your counselors if you think they are not the best fit to you. So this week it was all about the counseling contract, and I mentioned this previously that some people, when they start counseling, they never really receive their counseling contract. And obviously that is not really great, because at least as a part of our studies, we're highly encouraged to have a counseling contract with every client that we will see in the future. And this is something that needs to be presented to the client before they start talking about the actual issue. So even though it can be quite frustrating for the client, I believe on the very first session, in majority of the cases, the client comes in the middle of a crisis, they need help, they need support. So they come to that session, they're paying for that time, and they don't want to hear a contract. But you need to understand that it's very important for you to also know about the sort of therapy you're going to get, what sort of model this particular specialist is following, how will your counseling relationship progress, what sort of rules you will abide by in the counseling relationship, both the counselor and the client, what are the rules to the confidentiality, and in which cases the counselor might need to breach that confidentiality. So this is something that I would highly encourage you to kind of ask at the beginning of your first meeting if the counselor doesn't start that conversation themselves. And even though the contract can be in both verbal and written form, again, I would highly encourage you to ask for a written contract that you can actually read, take with you home, because again, the first session can be quite emotional. You might not really fully listen to your counselor. So it's good to have that document, somewhere at home, and you can come back to it at later stages if suddenly you have a question about a particular matter. So what can you expect in the counselor contract? As said, it should generally explain the type of therapy you will be provided with, and also what it is actually, what is this therapy model? We're not expecting clients to understand what CPT means or person-centered therapy or, other models. So it should briefly explain as to what the counselor will do, even to the point as to whether some homework will be expected, or it's all about talking, or there will be some exercises and etc. So then it should ideally go into the limits of the confidentiality. So obviously everything that you'll discuss with your counselor will be confidential, but in case when the client is considering self-harm or harming others, if they're planning a terroristic act or some other severe criminal offense, so for example drug or human trafficking, in all those cases the counselor will need to breach that confidentiality. It can also explain in which other cases some of their information might be shared with other individuals, whether we're talking in the form of notes that are requested by court, or the actual kind of information, the scenarios or like life situations they described, because sometimes the counselors will need to mention them during referral processes, or if they actually need to seek some support from their supervisors. So this should hopefully be all explained in your counseling contract. The next part is more administrative, so it explains how do you book your sessions, how many sessions will you have with that counselor, if there is a predefined limit, and what can you do when you reach that limit. So if you are doing counseling through NHS and you received 8 sessions, how can you ask for more, or can you pay for them yourself once you reach that 8th limit? Because nobody can precisely say how many sessions you will actually need to resolve a particular problem. It should mention the price of the counseling sessions, and in some cases specialists can also offer reduced fee for people who are unemployed, or if they are actually themselves starting to become counselors. It will also explain how do you cancel sessions, what sort of notice you should give to them, whether the sessions can be only organized face-to-face or whether the counselor offers other formats. For example, you can have a walk-in therapy, so you would walk with your counselor somewhere while having that conversation, or you can have online sessions. And then ideally there should be also another session covering the kind of less rarely discussed topics. For example, would the counselor allow food and drinks in their room, and whether you are okay to use your phone during the counseling session, whether the counselor will receive gifts from their clients, and finally, what happens if you meet your counselor on the street? Would you like to be acknowledged by your counselor, or would you prefer them to just ignore you? Because sometimes if you especially have somebody with you, you might not want them to know that you are doing counseling. So tell your counselor in advance how you would like them to react if they ever see you outside the counseling room. So you can see that there's a lot of information that can be provided in this document, and certainly it can feel quite overwhelming for the client when they're just starting counseling. They're obviously in the middle of some sort of crisis and they have to listen to all this information. And based on my experience, so in the practical session I just had, I spent 14 minutes explaining to my client the contract, and I'm quite sure that I haven't even covered some bits. So 14 minutes of my client's time dedicated to this document. So it is understandable, some people might not really appreciate that, but please also try to understand that this is important part of the counseling relationship, and that we are not doing it just for the formalities. There's a reason why we are taught this in our classes. There's a reason why we have to practice of how we can deliver it in the most friendly manner. Because yes, we've been told, how can you actually explain this contract without sounding too formal? Because you still understand that the client has something else on their mind. They want to talk, they don't want to listen. So please understand that this contract is created and explained to you so that you are fully informed about what is going to happen in the counseling relationship, and so that you can also own this process. So hopefully you found this interesting for people who haven't done counseling before, or are doing counseling but never received their contract, or the ones who are considering to start in counseling. please remember that counseling contract should be an important part of your very first meeting with the counselor. If you don't get it, please ask for it, ideally in the written form. And again, I hope you enjoyed this session. So next week I'll share more thoughts with you about how my practical sessions are going. I think the first one went quite well. And as always, please remember to take good care of yourself, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.